Good morning, everyone. This is the Friday, August 18th, 2023 meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission. Let me begin with taking our attendance. On the screen, looks like we've got Mickey Rowland.
Here.
Good morning, Tom Montgomery.
Hi, I'm going to have to get out. I got a hard stop just before 11, but I'm here
Thanks,
till then.
thanks for coming for this section, Tom. Abby DeMolina.
I also have a hard stop at 11.
Okay, thank you. And in the room with me, I've got George Butterworth. Good morning. And we have staff, Holly Backus.
Morning.
Morning. Okay, well, let's go ahead and begin and get as far as we can. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
I approve the minutes as submitted, and as I say every month, I can't say enough nice things about Abby for the way she's doing it. They're right on, Abby, right on.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Abby. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, George. Is there any public comment? I saw one person, Polly.
Polly's here for the historic tax credit application.
Oh, okay. Well, seeing none, we'll move on to the staff update on the ongoing survey of historic resources.
All right, so you all saw the email I forwarded on the next batch. If there's any comments, that would be great.
I didn't have very
share.
much luck opening. I
Opening
opened
it?
it. I got
Okay.
to the file where you could download it,
Yeah.
and then it said it doesn't.
It was weird. It was giving me as well. So,
Same thing happened to me.
okay, so I
Maybe
was wondering,
Jenny can send another link or something?
what I can.
Or can you do it in a PDF and send all of it to?
Yeah, I should be able to do that. It was a funky link. I don't know what, but I was actually giving up on it, so I'm not surprised you guys had problems with it too. But I wanted to, let's see. So I respect that, and they'll be fine with us waiting a little bit longer to provide comments, but I think you're gonna see some really good stuff, some good histories. I haven't done 100% of the reviews, but from what I've seen so far, it's really good. Plus the fact that you'll see some, not this wasn't a good example, but you're gonna see some really great photos, especially when we get on to like Main Street, taking into account these high styles. Some of the history that NPT has done over the years, a lot of NHA's older photos, which is something that we were asking to provide. Sorry, busy. For instance, this one. You get to the historic photos. So look, this is awesome to show what it used to look like, because this is very important for not only documenting what it looked like, you know, before HDC, but also if somebody wanted to come back and ask for something that maybe was appropriate, but the commission may not be necessarily agreeing with it, and obviously photo documentation is very helpful. So it just shows the evolution. And again, I would definitely thank NPT for their ongoing efforts of assisting us with this effort. We are still with this particular project with PAL, which is the fiscal year 22 grant. It's confusing because finance is already in, just almost getting fiscal 24, but this contract goes through September of next year, so we do have some time to flesh things out. And you know, we don't have to rush, which is good. So we will have an overlap. And then to basically segue on the ongoing overall survey work, our fiscal year 23 grant that we've received, the latest one, that RFQ is out the door. And hopefully we'll have some respondents by the end of the month. I think it has to give 30 days. And I'll let you all know what we get, and we'll be moving forward in that. So we will have some overlapping with contract, but that's fine. It's the nature of the beast, something I'm learning with procurement.
Right.
And we'll just be continuing on with the Grant Point, Cliffside kind of area and following what we mentioned in our application.
The Brant Point work was so fascinating, but we did have a little bit of a deficit as far as older photos, but now that we're getting back into the core, it seems like they're appearing again, and Pal's work has just been fantastic the whole time. Has there been any sort of adjustment in the RFP for the budget? It sounded like there were issues of being able to do all the work and be able to do as many properties as we have been doing.
Yes, so yes and no. We were able to request that the respondent to the RFQ is somebody who has had Nantucket survey work experience,
Okay.
which will also narrow down the field of respondents that are actually meeting that criteria, which is good. That's kind of some changes that has happened at the state Attorney General's office. When we first started with the survey plan, it was a different kind of aspect. We had basically a field of people we could pick from, and it was, here we go, and we advertised it. Now we have a specific set of people to send it to. And then we have to go, like all other RFPs and RFQs for government, you usually have to go with the lowest bidder. So putting that stipulation in there is gonna help with that. I think next year will be, when we do our next fiscal year MHC grant, we're gonna ask for more. Bottom line, because as we're getting into these larger areas out of the survey plan, you guys remember we divvied the island up into 49 different neighborhoods, kind of some of them that happened. Most of it organically, but then once subdivision control law kicked in, then there's some rigid lines. But we also had to do it with Hal's guidance of what is tangible, what is manageable when we have these projects. That's why we're gonna be multiple years within some of these neighborhoods. So I did speak to MHC on that. Can we ask for more than $20,000? And there was a yes.
Good.
Which,
And then inflation.
well, inflation, but also because there are now that, since we've been approved as a CLG in 2021. We were the 27th community within the Commonwealth. Now I want to say there's 30.
Mhm.
And just because the survey grant process happens every year, every fiscal year, it doesn't necessarily mean every single CLG is asking for that funding. So they do get to a point, and again, this money is being allocated from Congress. They're required to give 10% of their federal funding to the CLGs. So if we ask for a larger chunk of change, it would more than likely be, helpful for that. Yeah, so I'm happy. And then, of course, as you all remember too, that kind of segues into the CLG. And I know our colleagues over in Penn are actually in the Zoom today, but that's actually going to be a point of another CLG application. So we will be doing, so basically they're going to be tackling the neighborhood of New Guinea. So we will they'll be the applicant, but we will be obviously in support, and we'll write a support letter. I will, and I think the Historical Commission should be doing that too. Emphasize, thank you. So yes, good stuff. I'm making a note here. I will see if I can resend that link, and if it doesn't go through, I'm gonna see how I can combine all of them together for everybody, maybe in a zip file.
Okay, that
Hopefully it
sounds
won't be
good.
too big.
Are there any other questions about the current Form B surveys? All right, so why don't we move on to Five Surfside? I noticed that there weren't any changes on the application, so this is just a resubmittal and a new a newly dated letter,
Yes.
basically.
Yes, sir, yeah. Sorry, I'm Polly Waldorf. I represent the property. So,
Morning, Polly.
good morning, Holly. How you doing?
Happy Friday.
Yes, yes.
Would anyone like to make a motion to send another letter of support for this project?
Like to make a motion, we send another letter for this project.
Thanks, Tom. Second,
Second.
was that you, Abby?
Yes, that was me. I seconded.
Thanks. Mickey?
Yeah, I've got a question. Can you explain what's going on with this letter again? I mean, maybe I just missed the introduction to it, but why are we doing this again?
Oh, go ahead. I think you probably know.
Go ahead, Colin, you'll answer this best.
No, actually, I think you might. I feel ignorant.
There's just, after a certain length of time that there needs to be another application made. And there are no changes to the previous application. So we just need to, just as they're re-upping their application, we need to re-up our support letter.
Correct,
Okay.
they're trying to hit the August 30th application, because remember, the state has multiple application deadlines for this. And it's just a cyclical aspect, so we're just providing another support letter, no changes.
So-
Okay, so I'm an I.
And George?
Aye.
Did I miss anyone? I think that's everybody. I as well. So we'll send a new letter out.
And with that letter, literally all you'll have to do is change your
Change the
dates.
dates.
I mean, if you wanted to add
Yeah.
something into it, that's fine, but
Okay.
that's pretty much all they're looking for, that it's a new letter.
Yeah.
Very boilerplate.
Great.
All right.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Polly. Happy
Thanks,
to
Polly.
see it.
Thanks, bye.
All right, then let's move on to the CPC grant application for September. Clary, are you on? Claire was in the middle of things in Florida, but she was going to break away and join us.
I can get into it.
Thanks, Holly.
No problem. So, I had the privilege of meeting with Ken, Clary, and Erica before they left back to go to Florida. We also brought in town, DPW, Chuck Larson from Strategic Projects. And Abby was able to attend with us, which is great. And it's basically going over how we could reinvigorate the application, because there's, as I mentioned before, there's short-term priorities and long-term priorities that we really need to look at the sidewalks and the streets, especially on Main Street. So PIN will be submitting the CPC application, reinvigorated, revised, and then what we will need to be doing is provide some letters of support. So one should come from the Historical Commission. I will also provide one, and I believe other organizations will. Mickey, were also mentioned with your multiple hats with this commission and for ComDis. So I think Clary, oh, there's Clary.
Hi, so sorry for the delay.
No worries. I was just getting into the fact that you all will basically be putting the application together, that it's going to be a joint effort, and really looking at what's also going to be the town's responsibility for budgetary aspect versus what the CPC is going to, because that also was was kind of a main crux with their application. And really lean on to the work that you all just saw, what CPC provided to PIN and NPC for the sidewalks preservation plan. So this is to kind of segue into that as well. Feel free to jump in.
Thanks for joining, Clary.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I have to say it's a bit of a shock to go back to Florida after the lovely weather in Nantucket, so I miss being up there. We had a meeting and Abby and Holly were both there, so thank you for being on that meeting with us. And I think this application will be a bit different than the one that we put in with NHC 2 years ago with Hillary. And that really is, like Holly was saying, the division of scope of work between the town and what their responsibility is, which I think we agree is the documentation and really the engineering and looking at the 3D modeling of Main Street. In particular, their top priority and the urgent priority for them is starting to look at the sidewalk and the road in front of the 3 bricks. And so with SGH, they're going to go ahead and focus on that. And then with the CPC grant, which if we got it would begin next summer, we will use the same methodology that we use from Kim's streetscape presentation, doing the archival research, trying to understand the differences in materials, the history of those materials and the street design. Holly had mentioned potentially some cisterns that haven't been identified yet. So really trying to get the deep history of these materials, and then the documentation and laser scanning and the model will be useful for us for doing conditions assessments. And then really where it's going to come together is community workshops for understanding people's needs, complaints, challenges, issues with Main Street, with sidewalks, with the street itself, and the coordination and collaboration with the Disabilities Commission, the arborists, DPW, the town, and kind of starting to look at it holistically. And this is a huge part of what really needs to be done for Main Street. And this will go from Main and Water, at least up to the monument, if not further. We're going to have to look at how much we can actually get done in the 12-month period. But it'll be a really good start. And I think this and the previous work will establish a best practice and a methodology that can eventually be used to develop sort of a preservation plan for Nantucket streets and sidewalks. Yeah, Tom.
I have a question. What's developed in the last 2 summers is up there by the Civil War Monument. It has become an absolute nightmare at this time of the year to navigate through there with 4 streets all coming in together. And so I would hope that any work that's going to be done there would be done in the very off season and not start like some of the stuff they've got going around here now. I mean, it will not work.
I think that's a great recommendation. I know that when we were doing the digital documentation for Center and Liberty and some of the side streets, you know, we planned that off season in order to make sure that we could get access and clear visibility, and of course not get run over by trucks and Jeeps. And so I think that's one of the recommendations that we need to make sure to include in this work, is really thinking about the coordination of needed work with the schedule, with the traffic. So thank you for the reminder of that. And I will be sure to make a note of that for our proposal. We could even consider a discussion with the town and DPW of how they schedule projects and putting that in the recommendations from the report.
Yeah, because it affects not only Main Street, and mostly Main Street where it comes into Pleasant Street, which comes back right to where the spot we're talking about, but
Right.
up Milk Street and another of avenues that people try to use to circumvent that area just to get out of the traffic. And so it's huge. It's unbelievable, the tentacles in that spot.
Right. And I believe, Holly, you had mentioned that there are some meetings coming up about the Pleasant Street work. And so that might be another good opportunity to discuss schedule coordination and traffic. Yeah. Are there any questions? I want to tell you that my goal is to have a draft of our revised proposal next week to send out to you, to the town, to NPT, to others who are going to provide letters of support. And I'd like to get any feedback from you to make sure that the proposal could be as tight as possible and really applicable and relevant.
The scope
Barry,
of-
I'll be on island next week, and I'll look forward to getting your draft application, because I'm is very interested in trying to get at least that the area by the 3 bricks dealt with as soon as possible.
Right. I know that the town is working with SGH on a proposal and a contract for the documentation and really looking at that. That's kind of the pilot area, I think. So that will be really helpful for us moving forward for the rest of the street. So,
I think that because that area is in such horrible shape and everybody knows about it, that using that as sort of the lead, focal point of this application will help pull a lot of people into it. So I think that's good.
Perfect. Thanks for that idea, Mickey. I'll definitely make sure to put that in the proposal.
Hillary, are you on? I saw.
Yeah, hi. I had a quick question. First of all, thank you so much for working on this, for prioritizing it. I'm just really, really thrilled to see that this is work is going to continue. Which group is going to do the specification of materials? Like finding the right kind of replacement material that matches and all that. Is that going to happen with PIN or with the town?
I don't think we've gotten that far yet. So I think for this proposal, it would be a really good idea to include some look at materials and where you source them from, and perhaps that's just part of the collaborative process of this project, is to start looking at options for that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think if it's not assigned to one or the other, because it's so particular and time consuming.
Yeah.
And then
can I just jump in to add another thought to that, Hillary, is that actually, like the real specification and installation details and settings and all of that, I think would be a really good thing to have in a final sort of streetscapes preservation plan. So I'm not sure that we're going to be ready to do that at the end of this project, but perhaps it's the phase 2 of, okay, we've looked at Main Street, we've looked at some side streets, we've gotten the list of materials and maybe some sources, and then maybe there's another CPC grant where we actually provide the preservation plan with the materials and the sources, the details, the specifications of methods for installation and settings.
so I would just make sure that that is synced up with the town's timeline.
Okay.
Because people have a finite level of patience with disrepair.
Yeah. I understand that. I think
it's
there's
stretched.
also a danger in doing work without being fully prepared to do it.
Right,
And,
right.
research and documentation and making sure that we have the proper specifications. That's the end goal here, right? Instead of just doing projects piecemeal, we want to be able to have a plan. So that's
Yeah.
the end goal. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of material at the DPW too, which could be surveyed as part of this so that you would have actually an inventory of the historic material and make sure it doesn't like,
Oh, good.
make sure everybody knows where it is. I mean, it's out there, but nobody, I don't think anybody's looked at it.
Awesome.
And then my other question was about the trees.
Yes.
So is there, and which party would have the budget for consulting about approaches for the trees? Because that has always come up as a big question mark, and people have been afraid to kill the trees, so they just haven't done anything.
Yeah. It seems to me that that belongs in our application. We're really going to be acting as the facilitator and the coordinator, not just the researcher. I think having an architecture background, being an architect, that's my natural inclination, is to be the coordinator of multiple disciplines and scopes and practitioners. So we'll include that as part of our work. It'll be community workshops and it'll be collaborations between the necessary parties.
I just to Mickey's point, and what both you and Hillary are talking about here, I think knowing a little bit more about the materials up front,
Mhm.
as well as the trees, are
Mhm.
going to get the people that Mickey is talking about that really care about all this kind of stuff to agree with what we're trying to do a lot sooner than if they
Right.
don't.
Terrific. Well, what I'll do is I'll be sure to put that in the proposal. And then if you have any suggestions about wording, scope, who else we should include, I'm all ears. You all know how this works on the island much better than I do. So I'm really happy to hear your suggestions for that.
Any other questions on this?
No, just I also wanted to mention that, Matthew Bronski is engaged with us, obviously, and very excited to work with all of us on this effort, so, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think having Matthew and Christian doing the scanning and the parabolic modeling, and it's going to be an amazing thing to actually, I think the community will love seeing that, quite honestly, in a model, to really understand here is what the safety threshold is for an incline and a cross slope, and here's what we've got. And you're really going to need the community values of how do we prioritize safety with heritage trees and heritage materials. It's going to be a really complex discussion, as you all know. But I think the modeling is going to be really, really helpful for the community understanding of this.
I agree with the phasing approach to this, because there's so many aspects of it that needs to be done, and doing it appropriately, and it's comprehensive. So having it phased out is definitely something to really keep in our mind.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you all for your help and support. And again, I will send this to Holly and Angus for distribution, and my email will be on there. So I'm happy to receive any questions or suggestions next week.
Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks. It's good to see you all.
You too. You got rain all week.
Us too. So thanks a lot. Bye.
All right, well, so
Maybe I'm wondering, if I may, with this time crunch, and the commission's really not gonna meet between now and the deadline. I think it would be a good idea, obviously, as soon as we receive the draft, to send it out to the commission, but maybe for the commission to vote that you write a letter of support for this application.
sure.
I think that would be. cool.
I honestly, I can't imagine anyone on the island not wanting to
Right,
support this, but
exactly.
do I have a motion to write a letter of support if that happens before our next meeting?
I move that we write a letter of support so that everyone knows what's going on.
I second that.
Sammy? Mickey?
Aye.
George? Aye as well. So we'll do that as soon as we hear back.
Perfect.
Thank you for bringing that up, Holly. All right, well, let's move on to the Historic Home Preservation Sub-Grant Program. Abby, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I just wrote a quick letter to the CPC, letting them know that we're planning, like, we're intending, and it's just a high level overview. And then similar to what Cleary mentioned, that once the draft is available, I'll just share it with the commission, everybody can review it. But the idea with this is, as we mentioned, is to apply for the CPC funds for the kind of administrative and consultative work. And then if we get that grant, then we would apply for the larger grant federally to actually do the work. So that is the goal, and happy to share the draft as soon as it's available.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions or comments on that?
A lot of interest, I think we'll see.
All right, well, let's move on to the NAPC review. Do we have, what's the latest with that?
So I have been in meetings with the team of NAPC. So just the commission is aware, they're obviously working on behind the scenes stuff, gathering information, gathering people for interviews. And they'll be doing that before they get here in October. They'll be here for the first week of October, 4 of their members. To really see how the HDC works and the functions of everything. I think what's important to note is that they're not going to be interviewing this entire commission, but they will be interviewing you, Angus, before they get here as chair of the historical commission. They really understand, obviously, you know, the collaboration and teamwork that needs to be done with the with both commissions, you know, together. And what that means for the CLG. You also gotta remember when we had our camp in November of 2020, one of their recommendations was for us to be a CLG. So that's kind of ingrained. They understand the collaboration. And I think the team that NAPC has picked for us is a really great group of people. I know 3 of them really well. I think some of you will also know them. And one member who I've met in the past, but I didn't really know her that well. She is a planner with Nashville. So another really, you know, prominent historic district in the country. So I'm really happy to see how this is going. They're going by, if you remember, that HDC scope that was adopted by the select board. So that's what their crux of it is. But by the end of the year, there will be a report of recommendations. So there will be at some point between now and October an email that I'll be sending out to one to the HDC commissioners and one to you all with a SWOT analysis, so strength, weaknesses, to basically for them, again, information gathering. So, and that will be fully anonymous, but I will let this commission know when that is ready to be sent out.
I'm happy that they'll be in touch with me. I'm thinking about the advisory boards that have served for so many years and are, you know, doing the best they can now with advice. Is that I feel like at least the historic structures advisory board should be, or Mickey, representing them, should be contacted.
I have given his information, so, you know,
Okay,
I can only say here, it's up to the team to figure out, and they know who everybody is and everybody's, you know, duties, if you will, and who they represent. But I really don't know in, you know, in the crux of things, if they're gonna be surveying everybody or doing an interview with everybody.
and
So,
what about an opportunity for the general public who's
Yep.
affected and has
Yep.
opinions?
they are gonna be doing that as well, both, through interviews and as well as, anonymous.
Okay, will there be a public forum or any sort of
I
meeting?
don't think it's
or-
gonna be a public forum. No, they're gonna be,
Okay.
because again, they kind of also want to have that anonymity, is that how you say that, anonymous component of it, so. But you know, again, I think what's important to realize is, you know, National Landscape Preservation Commissions have been around for over 40 years. This is what they do, this is their bailiwick. In addition to the fact that they are preservation professionals, whether they're in the law or they're, you know, commissioners themselves or their staff. So this is a really, I mean, out of all consultants that the town of Nantucket could have hired for this is it. These are the people, and I'm very, very happy to be listening to me and not, you know, recommending anybody else. Because, you know, again, I think everybody is going to really see that these are subject matter experts. Really are gonna dive into the crux of everything. So best management practices, you know, those are type of things that they're gonna be looking at, from what we do now to what can be done, what other places have. It's really gonna be a robust aspect of that, so.
Can you share their contact information, the 4 people who are gonna be doing the interviews?
They probably, let me ask how they want to handle that, if that's just directly through the executive director or not.
Okay. Commissioners, any comments, questions?
Well, I would reiterate the concept that I would love to speak with them myself personally, considering my history with the HDC for 40 years, plus my role on the HSAD. So I would like that.
I will emphasize that. And, you know, again, the team members, from NAPC that's been, set to do this are familiar. Lisa Craig is the lead. Lisa Craig, you probably remember her name from our Resilient Nantucket process. She's the one who created the Weathering Together initiative
Right.
in Annapolis. She was part of the whole Keeping History Above Water with Newport, but also that brought Nantucket. She has the, I like how I like to say Clary's a trifecta because she's an architect, planner, and preservationist. Lisa in the preservation world has every aspect covered, from being a board member to being staff to being with the working for the National Trust for Historic Preservation. She has all aspects from nonprofits to profits. So for her to be the lead, I think that's a, plus she knows Nantucket, you know, she's worked with us before, which is good. And then you have a law component being looked at by Will Cook. You all probably heard his name through CHP, who it makes up the expert council that's working with the town on our wind farm reviews. And Will is obviously part of NAPC as a quote unquote trainee. He also helped facilitate our training course that we had in 2020 with NAPC. So he's engaged. And then we also have Kim Rose. Some of you remember Kim Rose. She was the last PIN co-director. And PIN, so basically Kim works with Lisa. She's very knowledgeable. She's a graduate of PIN. And then the next lady named Robin Ziegler, I think is her last name. And again, she is a planner out of Nashville. So she also is engaged with all of that. It's gotten very knowledgeable. So I'm really excited. They're, again, they're engaged, and this is what we need, so.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? So let's move on to, it really is more about demolition than 9 Sherburne Way, but that is just an example of what's going on with the system. And Mickey and I have followed this through the historic structures and watching, being at HTC meetings, but I feel like Holly and Hillary probably have the most knowledge on this. So Hillary, if you don't mind, do you want to just open this with some background?
Sure. I mean, I think the question is what do you guys really feel is most valuable to discuss? I asked Angus if we could put this topic on the agenda, and he kindly agreed. I think Holly had some well-placed concerns because it is an appeal to, as you could see in the packet. So a relevant issue is that I, along with some other people, formed a project fund at the Community Foundation. I think it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, called the Keep Nantucket Real Fund. And it was a vehicle that folks could contribute to, and then it could pay for initiatives that were important for preservation that were outside of the scope of what the town was able to do. So it paid for the original research on the streetscape. It paid for that preservation engineering report that SGH performed. And, I think we've seen that sometimes these initiatives can start processes going, can jumpstart processes that lead to a lot of good. This fund also paid for the legal opinion about the HDC's right to create advisory boards, because it was an independent state agency. And that's something that is going to be presumably explored. I don't know if it'll be explored by MACP, but certainly relevant. Now we've, after discussions with the Community Foundation and some of the different things that this group, the Nantucket Real Fund, wants to accomplish, we incorporated. Honestly, we haven't really settled on what this group wants to do. REAL is an acronym for resilient, engaged, authentic, and livable. So I think there's a broad range of quality of life, governance, and preservation issues that all intersect if we're going to have an authentic community in the future. We have to have the processes in place to support and preserve those elements in our physical environment. So our group decided that the system had failed when it allowed this building to be demolished. And the only recourse available in our system of laws is to appeal to the appeal board of the HDC. When the HDC makes a decision, it's final unless it's appealed within 10 days of having the certificate of appropriateness available from the town clerk. So we decided to appeal this, and the letter is kind of a very short summary of the basis of the appeal, conflict of interest at the HDC, lack of consideration of the full historic story. The report that you have in the packet was never, it was presented to the HDC, but never deliberated. Finally, the very sad outcome is that we appealed this. We filed our appeal on a Wednesday, and they demolished the house on a Thursday, the next Thursday. So the house is now gone except for a small wing. The wing actually has a very interesting story. So it's good that it at least was saved. The former owner of the house said that that was Eastman Johnson's studio that was moved and added onto the house. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that could have been known about this house. It was fully scanned at, I think, Holly's insistence, which is a really good thing. But it's no longer here. And, you know, our system, I think, gets a lot of support from neighbors and abutters. When they don't want to see something in their neighborhood go away, they can be extremely effective in holding the HCC's feet to the fire for protecting structures. But in this case, you know, one of the arguments that I think really flawed arguments presented in the over 1 year of discussions about this structure was that all of the other old structures on the bluff had been demolished. So why should this one stay? All of the neighbors have trophy houses. And in fact, this lot was purchased by a neighbor with the intention of clearing it. And so what do? You know, if your system relies on abutters to be, you know, to be wanting to keep historic structures, if the abutters don't value or don't understand the historic structures, then, and the HTC, you know, is ineffective at keeping them or understanding them. And Holly, Holly, I don't want to speak for you, but in the minutes, like just about every time you were asked, you said it was a contributing structure. And that's recorded in the minutes. So nonetheless, the structure is gone. And, you know, it might have been that they would decide that it should be gone, but it was really never heard. The process, I think, really failed. So we decided somebody needed to appeal this, and it needed to be an organization dedicated to preservation to appeal it. And that needed to be us, because nobody else was kind of geared up or willing to bring an appeal. We did try to find other people. So anyway, that's where we are. And you know, I think I thought it would be interesting for this group to debate, not necessarily the merits of the appeal, because I think that will be heard at the select board. And the date, by the way, is September 20th, will be the date of our appeal. But the question of, you know, what can this commission do to make sure the system doesn't fail? So thank you for hearing. I'm happy to take questions about the information in the packet or really anything, but I thought it would be a good vehicle to kind of put a fine point on how important and what the grave consequences are for this topic if something isn't done.
Thank you for that, Hillary. We're not really here to talk about the appeal itself, and specifically 9 Sherburne. It really is more about the process, and as you say, how can we avoid this happening in the future, and what are the flaws in the system, and how can we assist in avoiding this in the future, and if there's any support that we can offer in this and future, you know, trying to figure out what happened and why, and make improvements. I believe we're all supportive of that. So any questions from the commissioners or comments from the Mickey?
I comment.
Hi, I just joined. I got on. Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
How is everything? Good.
You know, we don't know.
All right.
We're in the right place. That's good.
Mickey, were you about to say something?
Well, you know, this is an important subject. I think that, you know, and as Holly has mentioned before, I believe that the NAPC review hopefully will deal with this in a grand way. I mean, in a bigger, you know, way that will be meaningful to everybody involved. I still think that that there's a, we talked about getting, and I forget the woman's name, but from Boston down to do a discussion about demolition policy. And I think that the sooner the better. Does it make sense to wait until after the NAPC report is filed? I'm not sure why that's important, but I just think sooner is better for that discussion involving us, the HDC and the advisory boards.
I think the only question I have on that, Mickey, is a good point is, Holly, I know you've mentioned previously that I think even if we do have Jennifer, which I think she should come and give us an overview, I think we do need to be mindful that, and Holly, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that Nantucket doesn't necessarily follow. So it may be helpful, but it might not be necessarily like directly correlated with how Nantucket as a community can address demolition. So we might want to do something more tactical in that. Let's make sure if we're having people come speak or however it's done, that it's going to be in ways that we can address it. And Holly, I don't know if you want to add to that.
So the crux really, I think that this commission needs to realize is, first of all, we are unique. We in Back Bay, Boston, are the only two special acts in the Commonwealth. We don't follow Chapter 40C. So having Jen to come here to talk to us about demolition and demolition delay, we don't follow that niche like everybody else. So, but I highly recommend waiting to having her involved until the NAPC is done. I have good news that Jen is actually accepted to be interviewed with NAPC, so that's a good thing for the historic district overall. And I do, again, that's kind of putting her in a position, awkward position, that I really don't want to do that. So, there's that. I do, again, I respect, not second guessing the other commissions, who is the regulatory body for the historic district, their decision on this particular application, especially if they're pending appeal. It's not necessarily legal, but it's obviously not appropriate. So, I respect that. Thank you. I think the biggest thing, as I mentioned before, it's all about education. And again, with this, it is a concern. It is about policy, procedures, process. Definitely, I think we're going to see personally as being, reviewing almost every single demo applications since 2019. I think we're going to see more of them. But today, I agree, but again, we don't follow the typical boilerplate law. We have our own, and one of the part of it is that our historic district special act has more power than any other. Again, this was a community that we saw forefathers in 54, 55, saw and actually earlier than that, and really think about it, in the 30s, really saw the need to have control of our historic architecture and historic community. So, having this review, and that's why I said it time and time again, is going to be very, very important. Will we get, they're going to come up with a list of recommendations, but here's to say that we can't dive into it further after those historic recommendations. And quite frankly, we may need to. So again, I respect this commission and Vicky for your want of having Jen come down to Nantucket, but again, having the review done is important, and you can see the fact that she's going to be interviewed is, I think, a very important aspect of it too. Don't really want to, get her into a discussion without having that taking place. I am all about how can we learn what can be done a little bit better. And on the flip side, I want to get away from demolition in general. On the flip side, there's a sustainability aspect. Take away that this is a historic structure. put that aside. We know how many applications, there are a lot of applications that come in across the board. From this time frame as a colonial revival all the way through even in the 2000s. And at what point, can we look at what we have on the books outside of the special act and say, from a town's sustainability, I just had a conversation yesterday with fellow sustainability members about this and looking at deconstruction as a component of preserving. The fact that we had a historic tax credit renewal before you today is another form of preservation, and educating the public on what historic tax credits can do. It's a form of preservation, combining features inside and out. So there's things that I think this commission can do to help emphasize the retention of structures, the retention of both interior and exterior features, and making it so we're not seeing a 1950s post-war Cape being demolished, even though they tried for 2 solid years to have somebody take it. There's all sorts of aspects to it. And I think those are the reasons why we are seeing predominantly, for the most part, demolition. I think this particular location and application is a little bit of a different circumstance, but I'm looking at it as a whole. So I hear what Nikki's saying about having Jen here, but I really want to have the review on that first.
From what you're saying about Jen and what she has to offer the island and the HTC and anyone else who's interested, is that there are policies and procedures that she's familiar with, that she can explain to us and teach us about, but that Nantucket is, along with Beacon Hill and Back Bay, is a category unto its own that is more restrictive and more selective about that process to protect the historic resources. And so I think that is some training and education is helpful to know as a base, and know that whatever we have here is more restrictive than that. But if there isn't like a foundational familiarity with policies, I'm afraid that we'll be faced with more of these situations. And the demolitions, I agree with you. I think that it's likely that we will have more applications, and the more demolitions that happen, I think the more demolitions will be getting applications for. It's sort of one thing that sort of feeds on the other. And so hopefully we can turn that trend around and be going the other way. Any comments, questions from the commission? Hillary, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to emphasize that this commission, the role of historical commissions in Massachusetts, I mean, this commission is organized under the state law, Section 8D, and you are responsible for surveying and educating and advocating for the protection of historic resources, both directly to the public and to other bodies in the town. And you're also responsible for advocating through bylaws. And Nantucket has the most comprehensive bylaw for preservation anywhere in the Commonwealth in terms of the whole island being a historic district. I don't really see there being, I guess the thought that, well, we're not under 40C, so we're separate. That doesn't really resonate with me, with my, I've studied the special act, I've studied 40C formally in school. And, the bottom line is the HDC has the ability to deny a demolition permit, full stop. And so the question is it's not within the law, it's the implementation of the law. What are the bylaws of the HDC? What are the practices of the HDC? And their guidelines they're in Building with Nantucket in Mind. Those are the guidelines of the HDC. And there are demolition guidelines, which include things like there must be a public hearing. A public hearing, it means something in Massachusetts. It means a notice period. It means advertising. There's supposed to be a placard on the building saying it's going to be demolished. And, there's some due process, and the HDC doesn't ever do that. So those are the sorts of things that, Jen can help, but it's also just kind of common sense stuff. I mean, everything is available on different town websites, demolition policies. I have a whole folder of demolition policies. There's forums where preservation professionals and commissioners can discuss these things. So if this commission wanted to make demolition policy and advice on demolition policy something that you want to do, you guys should just do it. I mean, it's going to come out through this consultant, but it's also something that you as commissioners can just do.
Well, I think though, I mean, I guess Holly already brought this up. I think that if we were to decide to do that, I think it sounds prudent that we should at least see as part of the review what comes out before we would make a motion or decide to do.
Sure,
something
you
different.
could
It
do
just
that.
sounds-
You could wait.
It just sounds
or-
like that's the best, but I mean, it just sounds like
really,
there's something.
I'm sorry, I was
underlying.
speaking and I wasn't finished speaking, and I'm not.
I
mean,
know,
we're
I'm
not-
sorry, I have to leave the meeting. As I mentioned, I have a time commitment, so I was just trying to make that comment before I
Okay,
go.
so your time commitment is within
Yeah,
the two
I'll see you
allocated
later.
hours of the meeting, so, bye. You could wait for somebody else to tell you what to do, or you could put your thoughts down on a piece of paper and give it to them, and they could say whether or not they agree, and they're a great source of information. The next thing that I thought this commission might want to consider as a result of this having happened is the timing of the demolition delay bylaw on Nantucket. The demolition delay bylaw on Nantucket is 30 to 60 days. The purpose of it is for preferably salvaged buildings. So it exists to give, to have the opportunity for buildings to be salvaged. But the thing is it can start whenever. You don't have to have a demolition permit in hand in order to wait to expire your demolition delay. So you can apply to the HDC, not knowing whether or not they are going to approve the demolition. And you can at the same time ask the building commissioner to start the clock on demolition delay, which involves asking the building commissioner whether or not it's preferably preserved, in which case for salvage, in which case you have a 60-day delay, or if it's not preferably preserved for salvage, in which case you have a 30-day delay, and you have to advertise it and show that you've advertised it a certain amount of time in order to satisfy that demolition delay. But because our bylaw is not specific about when that starts, people are actually advertising for demolition or for salvage buildings that aren't even permitted for demolition. And it also leads to this problem that we had with 9 Sherburne, which is the applicant decided to knock the building down during the appeal period. And the building is now gone, and the appeal is just a matter of principle. The applicant can be forced to rebuild the building as it was under Massachusetts law. And they decided to take that risk. Of course, it will never be the same again. So I think another thing that came out of this that I wanted to share with the commissioners who wanted to stay in the meeting is that this demolition delay should start when this certified COA is available. Starting it before is a waste of time, and it leads to situations where a building can be demolished that perhaps there was a mistake, and a little bit more time and an appeal process should be allowed to develop. So that's something that would happen at town meeting. And as a member of the public, a preservation professional, and now, someone with a nonprofit invested in preservation on Nantucket, I'd like to see this commission request a potential action at town meeting to change that demolition delay so that it starts when the COA is available from the town clerk. It would give us a little more time to prevent things like this from happening in the future.
I think that makes sense. I don't see any reason why we would be opposed to that. When is this would be for the next town meeting? And when is the deadline for those articles?
Yes, so it's typically in September. I mean, we of course have a special town meeting now in November, but it's the timeline for the spring town meeting, which is set for May. It starts in September. So this is the time to begin proposing. And you propose it to Leslie Snell. And Holly, we'd see what Holly thought about it, and Holly could propose it, or it could be a citizen action. I mean, it's always better if it comes from the town.
Correct. I would say that. And on that note, Hillary, you'll be happy to note that I've already been talking with the former planning director months and months ago about looking at the demo delay bylaw and how we could strengthen it. And yes, again, we don't have because of the authority that our HTC has with the special act. We don't have the typical demo delay bylaw. So what Hillary has said is that does make sense to look at. But I did want to make it clear for the record that I have already been talking to the warden, where the former planning director left, about looking at that, and he said, yeah, that's probably a good idea. I brought it up to Leslie? No, there's been also a lot of other things going on, and so, but yes, no, I do think that looking at it, but in my opinion, I do think that this is something that this commission wants to look forward, to do, and not be a citizen warrant article, but I don't think that, I think it should come from within.
Right.
But it should be a collaborative effort, with all parties, meaning planning director, is supportive of it, the building commissioner is supportive of it, and maybe even the agency, something as a joint.
It seems like all those parties would be interested in it, and I think having the dialogue with the stakeholders and, the people who would be participating in its support and implementation should be contacted sooner than later. Don't we have, isn't the demolition delay a relatively short period? I think throughout the rest of the state, isn't it more like 6 to 12 months?
There are different, if you look at, and Hillary may have studied this a lot more than I have, but all the other 8 historic districts that follow chapter 40C, if they have the demo delay, which most of them do, they vary in time frames.
But more than 30, most of them are probably more than 30.
Yeah, but it's really different, Angus. And frankly, I think it's confusing, and a lot of people get confused because when you think of demolition delay, you really naturally think of it as a preservation tool. Demolition delay on Nantucket is not a preservation tool, it's a salvage tool. Because the ultimate, when, so I actually had a long conversation with Chris Skelly, the former, Jan Doherty's predecessor, about this, because we were thinking, well, maybe demolition delay could be used on Nantucket. Maybe it should be longer than 30 to 60 days because that's so short. And Angus, you're right. It's usually a year and sometimes 2 years. And he said, Hillary, I really do not recommend demolition delay in communities with historic districts. It should, if the towns that have historic districts, the demolition delay is in the areas outside the historic district. And the reason is because it lets the HCC commissioners off the hook. If a building should not be demolished because it's preserved for historic reasons, they should stop the demolition by denying the permit. So in our case, aligning the demolition delay, which exists for salvage reasons, aligning it to be a subsequent follow-up action to the preservation and issuance of the demo permit is really more about getting a process order in the right sequence, and buying some more time for appeal. it's just very, very sad in this case that this house was demolished before it could be appealed. And the applicant, like I said, did that at her own risk. But it's a loss for preservation. And I think it's a waste of resources to advertise a bill. And I think it prejudices the project a little bit, you know, where an applicant can get up in front of the HTC and say, well, we've already tried to salvage it, you know, we can't salvage it. It's really something that should happen once the demo permit is in hand.
I guess I'm thinking more of the situation with the move-offs where to secure property and to secure, you know, a buyer or someone willing to take a structure. There's just like, you need so much more time than 30 or 60 days to make use
Yeah.
of.
Well, maybe with all the work that NPT has been doing for salvage, this would be a good time to revisit that. Is that long enough for salvage, as you know, as Holly mentioned.
Well, we had a great lecture this summer at the Athenaeum, the partnership of NPT and was it the
Stephanie.
Athenaeum?
Yeah,
And-
Stephanie Phillips.
And
Yes.
it was a powerful lecture, which I feel like everyone should be required to see, but the biggest takeaway are the things that we sort of instinctively know about the efficiency of existing buildings and the materials versus demo and reconstruction as far as sustainability goes. And it's unfortunately on the island, there are resources that's not a concern. People can afford to tear something down, then they don't mind the associated expenses. But that is a large facet to it, is the sustainability. But as a historic district, we really do need to be concerned about, the preservation of our resources. So I think any tools that we can implement, encourage, support, I think we want to do. And if it's revisiting the bylaws and re-educating the HTC or any other parties that are involved with the demos, we need to bring those to the surface and revisit them.
Angus, I have a question, really, I think for Holly, because another wrinkle about the demolition delay when it's for preservation purposes is there's a process which starts with determining whether or not the building is preferably preserved for historic reasons. And the demolition delay is always given to the Historical Commission. The determination is always given to the Historical Commission. So there is this concept in Massachusetts in our preservation law that it's the Historical Commission that makes a determination about whether or not a building is preferably preserved for preservation reasons. And I don't know if that, the building commissioner makes the determination of if it's preferably preserved for salvage reasons. But we have this situation because the whole island is a historic district where there's just a question. Well, I guess there's a question of what should the role of the NHC be in these determinations of whether buildings should be preferably preserved for preservation. I mean, the HCC ultimately has sole authority over whether or not the demolition permit can be issued, but they can consult with other people. And the NHC certainly has is entitled to have its own opinion about these things. I mean, that's why it's the Preservation Planning Group. But I just wondered if you do revisit this, if that element of, obviously we're not going to implement a demolition delay for preservation purposes, but could we implement a process where there is a review of whether or not a building is preferably preserved in the estimation of this commission?
Yeah, no, it's important to figure out how that would work, because at the end of the day, the HTC has had the utmost authority of it all. You know, you gotta remember that the fact that it was created prior to any state or federal preservation law. So yes, historical commissions in the Commonwealth do the determination, but again,
We're different.
so, you know, that looking at what, our, fellow, you've got Van Boston, what they do, granted, they're not as big as us, but where are things that their special act is allowing them to do? Not, because only having two within the Commonwealth, it is a little, it's cool, but it's not, you know, at the same time. So yes, where, you know, are there aspects of chapter 40C that we want to proceed, you know, to tack into, if you will? Is that gonna require, you know, anything that happens to the special act, requires formal petition, that's a fun thing to do. So we would have to be looking at the demo delay, and how it's, I guess, how it could be worked on, so it's not taking the role of preservation away from the HTC, but at the same time, the process. So yeah, I mean, again, this is another reason why NAPC being involved for this discussion is important. But no, you bring up some good points.
I mean, I think it would be under 8D because that's the authority for the historical commission. And I think the question for NACP would be, could Nantucket benefit from a process of, if a building is proposed to be demolished, could Nantucket benefit from a process where the historical commission makes their own determination? The HTC might value that. They might disagree. It might put the commissions in conflict with one another. I mean, there's a lot of complexity, but I think it is a possibility because historical commissions under the Massachusetts general law have the ability to make determinations of whether buildings are preferably preserved for preservation. It's just that they also are given the ability to impose a demolition delay in other municipalities, and we wouldn't want to have that. That wouldn't be something that we would ask for, because that is with, we have a stronger ability, which is to stop it. But the NHC would then be telling the HDC, in our determination, this building is preferably preserved for the following reasons. And they would then agree or disagree with that. That's how I could see it.
It sounds like from what I'm hearing that this is part of our mandate. So it doesn't seem we would have to get special permission to do this. It's part of what we do. I mean, I guess you'd be polite and say that we're going to start doing this, but too many places are being gone without anybody saying anything about it. So I would love to, I don't know what the starting point is, if we have to go to the all town meeting, or if we can just say, knowing our mandate as a historic commission, we are going to start doing this.
Well, we can, what I'm hearing is we can offer opinions and advice. At the end of the day, it's going to be the HTC.
Yeah, but at least we try.
Anecdotally, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I feel like the HDC could really lean into the surveys, and as we have emphasized and Holly's emphasized how important those surveys are. As we're finding out that the 89s, are, some are accurate, some are not. But my point is that the HDC leaned into those evaluations and surveys, and when they saw contributing, they were more careful in the review, and when they saw non-contributing, it was easier for them to let more happen to those buildings, whether it was an otherwise maybe not appropriate addition or changes or demolition. And so So I think that it's helpful for them to have more guidance and information when they're reviewing these applications.
It sounds like we could just, as a commission, when an application comes up at the HDC, we can decide whether we want to review that on our own and give our own advice to the HDC. I'm sure as a public body, we'd have to, do the noticing in the agenda and invite the applicant to come to our meetings too, to present their cases. But I think I think we could just do it on a case-by-case basis, it sounds like.
We could do that. You also are also familiar with the timelines. An application can come out and go through, be reviewed before, between our meetings.
But we could have a special meeting, couldn't we?
Have a special meeting, such as we did with Easy Street. When something comes up that we have a strong opinion about, we can show up for that.
I do think, when you get your interview with an APC, this would be a good thing to talk about. Really.
There's
a lot.
so many, yeah,
There is,
but
but
you're right, this is a big one.
this is a big one. There's a lot of things that, I'm not saying it's not doable, but I think there's a lot of volume that we need to have. And making it tailored to the okay. And then APC, I know, is going to be looking at the other special act to compare and see, and maybe find out what they are. There's a lot to this review that they're going to be doing for us. So, yeah, I really do think this is something good to bring up, and I definitely.
Thank you. Does anyone have any further comments? Questions?
Well, I guess my one question, just as the person who asked for the agenda item, would be, I would appreciate being the person, being the group that's appealing this, if the historical commission, could make a statement, could evaluate what they wanted to, what a representative wanted to say in the appeal. I think it's relevant to the historical commission. And it just seems a little strange to have these appeals. I know people appeal decisions of the ATC for things that have nothing to do with historic structures all the time. But this is really about like the most grievance, the biggest grievance you can have as far as loss of historic structures. And it just does seem a little strange that the historical commission wouldn't have something to say about it to the select board. So I just wondered what you thought about that.
Let me throw it out to the commission. Commissioners, how do you feel about this? Is this something that that you feel the responsibility enough to have a representative show up to the meeting and express an opinion about this demolition?
We weren't involved. This commission never took on this demolition project specifically, as far as I'm aware of. So we don't have a history with this project. And I'm just thinking that I don't know. I think it's going to be. I think it's unfortunate maybe we didn't, but since we didn't get involved in it from the beginning, we don't have, as a commission, we don't have a lot of knowledge about this project. So we're sort of formulating our opinions after the fact, even though most of us know quite a bit about it. We never really took it on to begin with. So
Well, kind of not just the opposite, but I knew nothing about it, absolutely nothing about it. And I'm sorry we didn't weigh in before it's gotten to this point. So I don't know when the best time is to say something, but if we say something now, at least we're on the record as kind of going forward. We will be monitoring this more closely or something to that extent.
George, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I'm new to this whole thing, but I like it if we could play some role in helping make demolitions less common.
Well, I would say that this is a step in that direction.
Yeah.
To more directly get involved with what we see as a problem with the system.
Well, it might be a way just to throw up a red flag and say, you know, we're going to be watching this more closely. And I mean, from what I've read this morning, it's clearly a historic building, and it's too bad that it's gone.
You know, there were, you know, many people involved saying that it was historic, Holly and MBT, historic structures. They're, you know, independent research. And I mean, Mickey and I, through historic structures, certainly we're familiar with the processes that was going on and the building and making our recommendations. And with all the contributions that were made, you know, this was the result. And this feels like an exception, but it feels deserving of exceptional measures to hopefully avoid in the future. So, hi Rita, just popped in. Are you joining in this conversation, or are you just auditing? Your mic is off.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just because I missed the beginning of the conversation. I don't want to add in if something's already been said. I'm sorry to join late. We had our MPT board meeting.
No worries.
Thank you for coming in. We've had a great meeting, and this is the last part of it, but we've just been talking about process and how the process has sort of failed in this instance, and what role we can take to hopefully change future outcomes, whether it's policy or, you know, in this case, support of pushback on a decision for demo of this structure.
Yeah, I think in this case, you know, being with the fact that there was the disputed historical information and the 89 survey said that the structure was 1930 when other research showed, you know, it was clearly, I think, a lot older than that. That just, to me, drives home the importance of the survey updates that we're going through right now.
Rita, part of the problem that we talked about was that the HDC wouldn't even discuss the historic information that was provided. So was the conversation was more about the process and, you know, what to do when the survey information can't even be heard. And the question on the table was, well, anyway.
Hillary, what is the timeline for your appeal at the select board?
It's going to be on September 20th.
Okay, you already said that, right? Okay.
I mean, I guess that could be moved, but that's the date that we requested and that they gave us.
And again, you guys know that I'm liaison to both commissions, so I'm sitting here understanding processes, procedures. Need to reinvigorate some as well as this, but at the same time, if this commission wants to, you know, write something on behalf of the appeal or attend the appeal, I think without trying to again second guess the actions of your fellow commission, right? Because again, you two are commissions together with an MOU with the state because we're a CLG. I think it's important that it's more of a hierarchy comment, if you will, rather than specific. But I also say that in the fact that when the HDC or when the appeals go before the select board, they don't take the new information, right? They don't. They what's in the record, that's what they get. They don't take out new things. So it should not be based on anything that's been, you know, I don't know, it's gonna have to be, it's tricky.
Are you talking about timing and what's been submitted or what will be submitted, and that's what they make their decision on, or what?
The select board is there to make a determination on whether or not the HDC made an arbitrary or, you know, capricious decision.
Hmm.
I mean, they're very, you know, set in their process when it comes to receiving an appeal. They don't take in new information, right? So this commission, you know, if you're gonna be writing a letter or even attending, it needs to be a hierarching overview of demolitions in general, and that's not site specific is what I'm getting at. And I hope that the commission, this
Yeah.
commission.
Yeah, Holly's correct. You can't, they're not there to make decisions on new information. They're there to interpret the information that's already in the record, of which there is so much because it was heard over months and months in 2022, and then it was brought back and heard for months and months in 2023. I can't imagine there'd be any additional information that anyone could supply about this building. So the comment would be about, as Holly said, about stuff that you're already looking at that's there in the record, in the minutes and the meeting recordings and the packet, including the packet that's in your packet, because that was provided as official part of the record.
Well, we're talking about whether we're commenting specifically on 9 Sherburne or as this is, as it pertains to more systemic issues. Because that's why I wanted to have this be a discussion, is because this system. What role can best, I mean, what is going to be, what's going to be the greatest impact of what we could do at this point?
Doesn't it sound like that we could, as part of our mandate, write letters of opinion on whether something should be demolished or not? Or I certainly don't know how those letters should be worded, but so it sounds like we can't add anything to this since we weren't part of it from the beginning, but we could be seen as a body that favors no demolition for preservation purposes or salvage purposes. You know, we sit on both sides. I don't know how to present that.
So I think we're probably relying on Holly and Hillary at this point for guidance about what is the best move for this commission to make in this evolution.
Are we worried that this will backfire if we try to exert ourselves essentially against the HDC that we're?
Well, and that's not our goal, obviously, but if we can protect future structures, is this part of that process? I don't know. Hillary, can you speak to that?
Well, I think, I think the appeal will be very interesting. And there's going to be a lot of people who have stuff to say at the appeal. I think it would be helpful if representatives from the HDC or from the NHC were present in case the select board had questions. They might have questions about how a determination is made, or, questions about the structure. I'm sure they'll have questions for Holly. So I don't think you necessarily need to say anything, but if you could be there in case questions come up, I think that could be helpful for the select board and for the process. That's just, that's kind of how I would think about it.
I'm not necessarily going to be on island. The 20th is around the date that we're planning to get back to the island. So I may be still here in Vermont, but in any event, I could probably attend on Zoom. So I would like to watch the meeting, and I think as perhaps a representative, the Historic Structures Advisory Group, the informal group, which used to be HSAB, we might have some relevant information because we did review it and we had an opinion. So I think for that reason alone, I would like to attend it and be available if any questions came up regarding our comments about it from HSAC.
I'm happy to attend as well.
I would like to attend. What time of day is it? Oh, it's the
It's
20th,
Yeah,
Wednesday?
yeah, in the evening. It's the regular select board
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm not back until the 21st, so,
Well, it will be a hybrid meeting.
okay, good. I will put that on my calendar.
But then in terms of the broader question, I mean, I guess George asked about, will there be backlash? And I think it's a really relevant question. I mean, I had incredible backlash. I don't know if you all remember the meeting that I convened about the cottage in Wawinit that was proposed for demolition, and the demolition, or it was basically going to be renovated to the point of being demolished. And that was approved by the HTC, and a neighbor had appealed it, and the appeal was going to the select board. And this was it was in 2020, I remember, because it was during the pandemic. And I said to myself, and it was also before Holly was involved. So the NHC didn't have Holly, the town didn't have, Holly was working for the planning board and on the planning side, not on the preservation side. And I said, I wonder what I could learn about this structure like in a day. And so I got all these books, I went back through the paper, and the history of the structure, it had been built by the family that had the historic house next door. It had been built in the 60s in this certain style of a Wawinit. Anyway, I ended up deciding this is clearly a historic cottage structure that should be preserved much more than the HDC did. And at the time they were working off these 1989 structures, they met 5 hours total over the course of several meetings, and they spent literally 10 minutes talking about whether or not it was a contributing structure. And I was going to participate in the hearing as a representative of the NHC and make a statement about that the contributing nature had not been explored. And I had incredible backlash, And, ultimately I wasn't reappointed to the Historical Commission. So, I think that it is very dangerous waters for sure, but you have to decide, well, what are you here to do? You might only have 3 years, but sorry, I don't know if that's helpful commentary, but that was my experience in trying to come up against, trying to walk that that road to influence the HDC to not demolish historic structures, not allow the demolition of historic structures. It's a very dangerous road.
Thank you for that. Well, it sounds like there are interested parties in the commission in going. I don't know if we need to make a motion for anything or do anything other than be available for comment, I guess. Holly, what do you recommend?
I agree with what Nikki said. With the historical structures advisory group, facility staff, that group met on your own, provided comments as well, in addition to my own. And so there is a record, if you will, of comments being provided. And so there's that would be, I think, I'm glad to hear me. Want to do that. That is better than, I think, what Hillary's point was, the former sheriff trying to, and I think there's a couple other times too. Again, that's that fine line between trying to be an advisory to the commission, the HDC, and introducing new information, if you will. So there's already something in the record in comments. I think that, and that would be it, nothing from this commission. But I do think that this commission does have that overarching concern, if you will, of demolition.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this?
We're going to be we'll have one other meeting before that actually comes up. The NHC will be meeting before this appeal, so we can talk about it then too if we need to.
I think you're right. I think it's the day before. They'll meet the day before they hold the.
Do I have that right? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
actually, yeah, because the first is a Friday.
So we'll be Friday the 15th,
That's what I have.
will be the next NHC. Okay, that's good to know. Good, well, we can see who can go and what we can say, and I think it sounds like we should come up with some kind of a policy for this sort of thing going forward and how we can handle it. And when Angus listed all those entities, Nantucket entities, NPT and historic structures and everybody else that was there before we were, I think we should in the future make sure we're there right with them.
I mean, the hope is that if the select board remands this to the HDC because of the conflict of it, well, because of whatever determination they make, then there'll be an opportunity to discuss it again with the HDC, and they will be requested to reflect on their process by their Board of Appeal. And that might be a time when, yeah. And it might be that the HDC says, actually, it would be really helpful to take us off the hot seat with these determinations if somebody did weigh in. I mean, that would be one way to look at it. That could be
it. Sounds like a lot of people did weigh in, and thank them all for doing it. But yeah, but I feel like the Historic Commission should be there too.
And again, this is why updating our historic cultural resource surveys are important.
Yeah.
Yes, we can't do them fast enough. It'd be great to do the whole island in 1 year, but it's going to take time. Hillary, thank you so much for your dedication to the preservation on the island and your time and expertise in work with all this. Thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that, Angus. You're welcome. And thank you guys and Holly and everyone who's trying to preserve historic structures. They really are what make this island unique and special and so important, such important work. And I think that you guys are going to get there. So thank you.
Oh, good. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Or is there, we've got, the last piece on the agenda is other business. Is there any other business anyone has to bring up or cover? Well, I'll take a motion for adjourning.
So moved.
Thank you, Clement. Do I have a second?
Second.
Rita,
Hi.
Vicky,
Aye.
I as well. Thank you, everyone. And we'll
Thank
see
you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Just